This is the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire. On today's program, I want to talk about the reality that's all around us that should be blatantly obvious to every single person you know. It should be blatantly obvious to you as an individual. In other words, what I'm talking about is the world that we live in, whether we're talking about the USA or the EU or Asia or Africa or South America or wherever, whatever nation or continent on planet Earth, Australia, New Zealand, this program applies to you. And the information in this program is of vital importance. And you know, even as I say the words, the information of this program is of vital importance, my mind instantly flashed. As I said those words, my mind instantly flashed, and I saw in my mind's eye like every single cable news network lined up. And as my mind flashed on what I said, it simultaneously flashed on every single cable news network. And every single one of these cable news networks, without exception, will not look at, examine, acknowledge, show you via television images, photographic images, video images. They absolutely will not have guest experts and scientists on to discuss the kinds of things I'm going to talk to you about today. And that is just the tip of the iceberg, because all of those cable news networks, we would need to include all of the regular network television programs. They will say nothing about these subjects that I'm going to talk about today. And then we add to that all of the mainstream media, the giant papers, you know, like the Washington Post, New York Times, etc. The magazines, which primarily exist now on video. We could add to that social media, the internet, search engines, and I'm talking about the internet, the social media, the tech giants, and the search engines that are part of, let's just use the word, the system. That used to be a word in the 60s and 70s, you know. Is it part of the system? Because all of these media organizations that produce content and media, whether it's on the internet, film, television, or whatever, they march in goose step. You ever see those pictures of communist totalitarian regimes, like in Red Square in Moscow, and all the soldiers have their rifles and they're marching? It's almost like choreographed. They're marching row after row, and the soldiers, like a choreography from some kind of Broadway show, they kick up their shoes in rhythm. So you look at row after row of soldiers, and when they kick their feet up in the air as they're walking, they do it all at the same time. And that's to show you their power, their discipline, and the fact that they function as one military machine. And you see the same thing in the propaganda footage coming out of communist China and North Korea, etc. And then this has been this military display of power has gone on in ancient societies thousands and thousands of years ago. But in Nazi Germany under Adolf Hitler, you look at the old black and white propaganda films, and all the Nazi soldiers are marching in goose step, row after row after row. And it's supposed to be a psychologically intimidating propaganda footage. It's supposed to scare you. So that's where the expression marching in goose step came from. It came from Nazi Germany. Don't ask me what it has to do with gooses and stepping. I'm sure it has something to do with it. I have no idea. I know nothing about gooses. And that may offend a couple of you, but I'm from New York City. No apologies. And I know nothing, and nor do I want to know anything about gooses. And the whole, what is this story about cooking the Christmas goose or something? I guess it's a duck. I'm not trying to be like stupid on purpose. I guess it's a duck of some kind. I have no idea. But I'm not interested in eating goose for Christmas dinner. And don't write me an email about how Christmas is an ancient Babylonian holiday. I know that. I get that. I've written numerous books on that. In fact, I wrote a book that dealt with that called The Babylon Code with Troy Anderson. So I'm well aware of the fact that Christmas, as it is celebrated now, uses a lot of ancient Babylonian and pagan and occult rituals. But that's not what I'm here to talk to you about. So what we have here is these military armies marching in goose step. But what's a little more oblique to perceive is the fact that, just like in Nazi Germany, all of the media, when Hitler took over, all of the media came under the direct authority of the Nazi government, headed up by Hitler, a totalitarian dictatorship. And whatever kind of free news they had disappeared and went out the window very quickly. Because in every totalitarian regime, there's always a full-on effort to control all news, information, and opinion. So you lock down the minds of the people. And you do that is you promote experts in propaganda, mind control, brainwashing, and indoctrination to run all of your media technologies, whether it's film, television, newspaper, or whatever. So Hitler had some of the best and the brightest propagandists, men who were experts in scientific mind control. They were experts in propaganda. They were experts in indoctrination and programming the people. And they used a large spectrum of scientific, technological, and psychological principles. Because you see, propaganda just doesn't come because you rub the lamp of a genie and what the genie comes out. No, propaganda is a science. Mind control is a science. Indoctrination, social engineering are sciences. People study them. They get advanced degrees in them. So, in every totalitarian regime, the same is true with Communist China and Russia. But you see, Great Britain, the United States, the European Union, we, in terms of our media, in terms of what our founding fathers envisioned, and they expressed what they envisioned very clearly in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence. And their original vision for the United States was to have a totally free press. That's why one of our constitutional rights in the Bill of Rights is freedom of the press, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. And no one, the government or anybody else, is supposed to interfere with that or attempt to control it. These are the institutions and the freedoms that are designed to keep our nation free. And whenever a government has grown too big for its britches, it begins to squelch and to stomp on these freedoms. So the tragic reality is that at this moment of time in the United States particularly, the mainstream media, the cable news networks, the so-called newspapers, there's hardly any journalists. These men and women who pose in front of the camera, they don't spend their day researching the news. They don't do, for the most part, they don't do journalistic investigation. They spend their day shopping for an expensive tie, shopping for expensive suits and skirts and dresses and hairstyles, makeup, wardrobe, and doing whatever it takes to inject their faces with Botox or whatever, or have surgery so they can stay eternal young. They're all about image. They're nothing to do with content. And the ones that brag about what deeply credible journalists they are a pathetic joke. They're a fraud. So we have things on the horizon that are of the utmost danger. In fact, it's further than that. What is on the horizon actually represents a formidable threat to the citizens of the United States of America, the mothers, the fathers, and their children. And the same would be true in the European Union and other nations. And I'm just going to take one, for starters, one area that, if you notice, there is absolutely no serious, credible news coverage, journalistic investigation, because we don't have journalists anymore. We have prostitutes. Sorry for being so blunt, but they're prostitutes. They've prostituted themselves for their salary and for their position. They're not journalists. They don't dig up any information. So we have a number of potential threats, very serious threats that any honest scientist would agree is a threat. The only scientists who would not agree that these kinds of things are threats are those scientists and technologists who are on the take. And there are many who are on the take. Or if they're not on the take, they're threatened. And they're told if they spill the beans on this technological danger or whatever, they're threatened with their lives or harm to their children or loss of employment or whatever. So they're muzzled. So let's talk about one new technology that is operational now, and more if this new technology is being turned on even as we speak. It's being activated even as we speak. And that's 5G technology. And 5G technology has the selling point of 5G technology is that we must have it because it will increase the number of, let's call them highways, for the transmission, broadcast of all kinds of computerized information, all kinds of data streams, all kinds of electronic devices. You know, we keep growing more and more numerically in the kinds of electronic devices and equipment we have. And so we need more and more bandwidth to operate at faster and faster speeds, because many households now have multiple computers, multiple cell phones. They have cable TV, or they have satellite TV. They have all these devices, that will talk to you when they're hooked up to the internet. People have security cameras that are online and audio cameras, and the level of technology that is dependent upon electromagnetic frequencies to communicate, it keeps getting more and more. So what it does, the current 4G technology is slowing things down. But part of the reason the current 4G technology is slowing things down is because it's deliberately put in inadequately. And I know, because I've had a constant battle with the telephone companies and the carriers, and had to switch routers constantly. As you may have noticed, we've had a number of technical problems. And it's not due to ineptness on the part of anybody in this ministry. It's due to the garbage that the telecommunications companies give businesses and customers. In other words, they advertise all these speeds, etc. But I can just tell you here in California, where we have our studio, there's an enormous amount of usage of all kinds of electronic devices. Okay, but California was prepared for that a long time ago. But none of these devices are functioning properly. And I think that's partially intentional because they want to set up a demand and a reason to go to 5G. So the selling point of 5G is that 5G is far more powerful than 4G or 3G or whatever, 2G, 1G. 5G is far more powerful, and therefore when you go on the internet, you download stuff, you go to different websites, you upload information, you download information, you use your cell phone, computers, laptops, and all the other electronic devices that are ever increasing in their growth. Okay, 5G is supposed to be this very powerful technology which will allow us to communicate and do all of those functions with amazing speed and a total lack of glitches. Now, that's the selling point. That's what you hear. But what you don't hear is the serious concerns raised by scientists over the dangers of 5G technology. That's what you don't hear. What you don't hear is the fact that because 5G technology is very powerful, but it operates differently than, let's say, 4 or 3G technology. And it's almost counterintuitive. Even though 5G technology is far more powerful, the way the pulse of 5G technology works is that they are literally going to put in millions and millions of more cell towers. Let's just say here in the United States. Here in the United States, we now have cell towers like many countries all over the place. You can see them from the highway and all kinds of places. But those cell towers are usually relatively high. They're up on mountains. They're near the freeways. And sometimes they're isolated from people and stuff, and sometimes they're not. But there's enough of them for them to be noticeable everywhere. You know, those microwave cell towers, they look like a tower. Sometimes they're artificially designed to look like a tree. And then the actual antenna part at the top looks like a bunch of tubes or rectangles surround in a circular pattern. So it's an odd looking antenna, and you know what I'm talking about. You've seen it. So with 5G technology, in order for it to work, even though it's more powerful, they're going to have to add an additional millions and millions of new 5G transmitting towers. But the plan is to place these 5G transmitting towers, which will be shorter. They won't be on these giant poles. They'll be on shorter poles. The plan is to place these, and I don't have an accurate depiction of what's going to happen because I think there's a lot of disinformation. Some people say there'll be one on every block. Some people say that these new 5G cell towers will be every couple of blocks. But it appears that at the very least, these new 5G cell towers will be vastly multiplied in number, and they'll be lower level cell towers. But they'll be all over the place in family neighborhoods, suburban neighborhoods, and communities where people and children and schools are. Okay? They won't be in industrial areas. They won't be up in the mountains. They're going to be right there all over your community. So hypothetically, when you're jogging around your neighborhood or walking around your neighborhood for exercise, on an average walk or a jog, you're going to see a whole bunch of these brand new smaller cell towers, but they're generating a very, very powerful EMF wave. Now, I have heard all kinds of things about the laws regarding the installation of the 5G cell towers in neighborhoods with families and children. And so I'm not saying this is an absolute truth. It's just what I've heard. It's hard to find out what the absolute truth is. But we do know this. There's a ton of secrecy surrounding the release of 5G. That we know. There's tons of conflicting information about 5G. That we know. And then we know that something stinks about it because, like when people lie and corporations lie, which they lie all the time, they forget to keep their lies together, so their lies bump into each other. And so we were told about how absolutely safe the smart meters are, which many people have on their houses now. They're not absolutely safe. The smart meter is generating a high level of EMF waves that are permeating your house. They give some people, it doesn't affect everybody, at least noticeably, but it causes insomnia, it can cause anxiety, it can cause health problems, it can cause your animals, cats and dogs to act weirdly, and it can cause people to act weirdly. Because there's a danger in transmitting through a house a smart meter. But notice how nobody cares about that. Notice how the power companies don't care about your health danger. And notice how that if you try to get a potentially health damaging device removed from your house, you have to pay to get it removed. You have to pay for the privilege of removing technology that can be seriously harmful to you. How does that happen? Well, it happens because you have a local community government who's on the take. You have a local mayor and city council who's on the take, and you've got a lot of people on the take. That's how it happens, and nobody confronts them, so they get away with it. So there's a great deal of secrecy. Now, just to give you an idea of the increase in power in the 5G cell phone. And by the way, the reason I'm talking about all of this is I am in the process of finishing right now what I consider to be one of the most important books that I've ever written in my life. It will be an explosive book, but it will be a true book. And it's a book that I believe you must have and you must get, and you need to do it like now, because who knows if the book and its contents will be censored. But as many of you know, I do a considerable amount of research in scientific fields, technological fields. I was researching 5G 6 years ago. Microwaves, EMF waves, 10, 20 years ago. So this is just an extension of research. And I've written a brand new book that you will be able to pre-order any day now at paulmcguire.us. And if you pre-order it, you get a discount on the book. You get your copy mailed to you before it is released to the general public. So you'll get your copy of the book quicker than the general public. And you will get an autographed copy from me of the book. I'll autograph every copy of people who buy it during the pre-order. And of course, you get a financial discount. The title of the book is called The Greatest Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Mankind in the History of the World by Paul McGuire. Now, the title came about because I kept finding myself speaking and ministering and doing radio programs and stuff, and I found myself continually using this kind of wording. We are now in the greatest battle for the hearts and minds of mankind in the history of the world. I kept finding myself saying that, and I believe that 100%. So it wasn't all that long ago. It was a couple of weeks ago. I was doing a Paul McGuire Report radio programming, and I was just spontaneously saying something that I believe in the core of my belief system, that we are in the greatest battle for the hearts and minds of mankind in the history of the world. And I happened to look down at a mock-up of the book cover, and I realized that, no, I'm not shorter. Even though this is a very lengthy book title, I'm not going to shorten it for commercial reasons. This is what I believe. This is the core of Paul McGuire Ministries and Paradise Mountain Church. This is my calling. This is why I'm alive. And I don't care if the title, from just a strictly commercial standpoint, appears to be lengthy. I wasn't willing to cut one word out of it. So the title of this brand new book is The Greatest Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Mankind in the History of the World. That's what I'm trying to communicate. That's the central message. That's what I'm set on fire about. Because when I write a book, just so you know, I don't sit there and say, gee, what kind of book can I write that will make a lot of money? And I don't sit there and say, oh, gee, what kind of topic should I write about that will generate interest and make the most money and give me the biggest response? That's not how I think. In fact, if I'm discussing it with my wife or whatever, I will often say, I love my wife dearly, but I will also often say in kind of a thunderous way, I don't care if it's commercial or not. This is what God called me to say, and I'm going to say it. And so that's how the greatest battle for the hearts and minds of mankind in the history of the world became the title of my brand new book. Because that's the message that God has called me to communicate. And I can get into that later. But in this greatest battle for the hearts and minds of mankind in the history of the world, there are all these sub-battles or smaller battles. So we have the greatest battle for the hearts and minds of mankind in the history of the world. That's the central theme. And hopefully today we may have time for me to talk about one of the overarching truths. Because one of the overarching truths are that there is a powerful elite waging war. This is very difficult for uneducated people, and I'm not trying to sound holier than thou. There's two kinds of people I've met. People who are very happy being in a trance state, walking around in a fog, walking around like they've been hypnotized, walking around in a daze. That is their comfort zone. That is their normal or norm, and that's where they want to be. And if you dare to brush up against them, even if they're a Christian, and disrupt their euphoric trance state by saying something. Now, for example, this is kind of humorous to me. I don't know if it's humorous to you. It's kind of tragically humorous to me. But I know people, like you know people. I have family, friends, and stuff like that. Most people who I have acquaintance with, I don't tell them what I do. Because first of all, I don't want to brag. And second of all, what I do has a national and international impact. And that's not bragging. That's the truth. And so I try to, in my private personal life, even among family, just keep a low profile. I'm not embarrassed about what I do. I know I'm not going to get a thunderous applause for it, but I kind of try to keep a low profile. So let's say, hypothetically, I was to bump into somebody that I know. It could be a Christian. It could be anybody. And they're in that kind of self-contented trance state. Now, if I was to say, first of all, these people wouldn't even know that I'm an author because I've never told them that. But if I was to say to them, hey, I'm so excited, I just finished my latest book, or they said something to the effect like, oh, I didn't know you were an author, and I wouldn't really get into that. I would say, I just finished my latest book. And they may just ignore me, which is quite often the case. Or they may say, oh, what's it called? And then if I was to say, it's called The Greatest Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Mankind in the History of the World, I would get this really weird look and a weird vibe. Like, what? Like, what are you talking about? There's no battle. Because they're oblivious to it, okay? So there would be this discordant note between us in the conversation. That's why I usually don't say anything. Because you see, they don't perceive that there's any battle. They're just kind of in a happy trance state. And as Christians are the worst, to suggest to a Christian who's in a happy trance state, and I meet these people all the time, that we're in the greatest battle for the hearts and minds of mankind in the history of the world, you will experience rejection. You will experience some sarcastic remark or whatever. Now, I really don't. I mean, it's not like I'm not immune from wanting to be liked or whatever. But it's like that's the normal reaction I get. I mean, I don't get praise, and I don't get people complimenting me. The people that compliment me about my books and the people who praise me about my books are people of the same mindset, people who are hungry for truth. They're the ones that thank me, etc. And the same thing is true in your life. Most likely, there's very few people you can really tell what you really believe to. The rest of them are going to look at you suspiciously or like crazy. So the point is that we're in the greatest battle for the hearts and minds of mankind in the history of the world. And this presupposes, and although I teach it in the book, that there is a globalist elite, which there is. That's a fact. That's not debatable. It's not a conspiracy theory. And they are running the world according to their philosophy and ideology, which is basically they think they're God kings, and they think they're genetically superior than us, and they think because of their vast wealth and power that they have the intrinsic right to rule over everyone else. So, this is a very hard ceiling of consciousness to break through. Most people live and think in a realm of consciousness which would be the equivalent of by like a 12 by 15 square room, okay? And with like a, 13-foot ceiling. And if you dare to think above the 13-foot ceiling, they think you're crazy. Well, I spend my life thinking above the 13-foot ceiling. And so to even remotely convey to them your core belief, which my core belief is based on the biblical belief of the Apostle Paul, for our fight is not against flesh and blood, but it's against the principalities and powers, the dark unseen forces of wickedness in heavenly places. That means we're involved in a raging spiritual warfare between Satan and God, the fallen angels and the angels, the people following Lucifer and the people following God. And then the other thing is that when we look at the Bible as a totality, beginning with the warfare against God and Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, where Lucifer became the temporary god of this world, this battle, this spiritual battle, culminates. So, for example, we read in the book of Revelation that war broke out in heaven. So the biblical reality teaches us that we are involved in a war. And any Christian who deludes themselves into thinking that they're not involved in a war is like a madman or madwoman walking naked through a battlefield. I mean, they're defenseless. So war broke out in heaven, and so we as true Christians, are involved in two simultaneous spiritual wars. One war that is the war that occurs on the physical earth in the physical dimension, and the other war is the war in the heavenlies or the invisible realm. And we are to use earthly actions to wage a spiritual war, like standing up for righteousness and voting, other law-abiding things. And then we are to use the weapons of our warfare that are mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, things like prayer, intercession, fasting, evangelism, etc., to occupy the land spiritually using spiritual weapons. So any conclusion that somebody who calls themselves a Christian draws, which justifies a non-acceptance of reality the way the Bible lays it out, is delusional or disobedient. And in most cases, they're not delusional, they're disobedient. Okay, so the other thing the Bible teaches us is that Lucifer made himself the temporary god of this world by seducing Adam and Eve to reject God's word and to activate the law of sin and death through their disobedience to God. This allowed Lucifer to become the temporary god of this world. So from that time forward, Lucifer, functioning as the temporary god of this world, has an administrative hierarchy that could be symbolized by the pyramid on the back of the US dollar. It's an organizational flowchart. It also reveals the eye of Horus, or the eye of Lucifer. And in case anybody is confused as to what Lucifer's goal is, he had it prominently written on the base of the pyramid, where it says the words in Latin, Novus Order Seclorum, or New Order of the Ages, which means New World Order. So Satan, or Lucifer's ultimate endgame, and you see the problem that we're dealing with is uneducated Christians. They're uneducated regarding the Word of God, and they're uneducated regarding human history, because the Word of God clearly tells us that Mystery Babylon is going to return, a one-world government, one religion, one-world economic system. And then, if you study economics and history today, you see that all around us, the globalist elite are raising up a one-world government, a one-world religion, and a one-world economic system. So there's two parallel streams merging: the stream of Bible prophecy and the stream of geopolitics and economics. They're converging. So, to be blunt, only an idiot can't grasp that. So to walk around looking spaced out and confused, try adopting that posture in front of God, in the throne room of God. See how that flies for you. I don't think it's going to fly very well. So, one of the things we understand is that Lucifer, since the beginning of time, has raised up governments, raised up occultic systems, occultic governments, and we see many, if not the majority, of human empires and kingdoms in human history are not merely just men functioning as kings and queens and emperors, etc., but there's always a cult or a satanic underbelly or dynamic of occultism, Satanism, and witchcraft. And the same is true today. So it has been said that just approximately 12 men rule the world. And that may be the accurate number. And these men would represent the richest, most powerful men or women on planet Earth. And supposedly they're the heads of the international banking families. And also it has been alleged that many of these men, if not all of them, are deeply involved in the occult, the Illuminati, Satanism, and so on and so forth, from which they conduct rituals to Satan, which gives them their power to rule the world. Now, having said all that, now I want to pose a question to you. And this is a question that I've asked myself many times over the years. You look at the food supply that we eat in America, and America's food supply in many ways is better than most countries, but in some ways it's worse. You simply look at the food supply and you see, gee, our food supply has so many foods, so cancer-producing ingredients, lacks so much vital nutrition, that the actual nutritional component of our food supply is so bad, it's so deeply into the negative side, that you begin to just honestly speculate that, gee, nobody could have accidentally destroyed the nutritional value of our food supply in just a manner of random chance. The brutal destruction of any nutrients, any vitamins, any healing properties of our food supply is so in your face that part of you says nobody could have been so collectively stupid over so many decades. Somebody had to have actually planned to destroy the nutritional, life-giving, health-giving benefits of our food supply. Because the food supply, just like there's 5 corporations, globalist corporations that control the media, the food supply is controlled by about 5 or so multinational corporations, which represent the big food companies, just like we have big pharma and stuff like that. We have the big food companies. So you go into any, supermarket or giant food retailer or whatever, and they're essentially selling, almost without exception, they're all selling the same food products and drinks and beverages that are entirely produced by these 5 or 7 giant food conglomerates. And maybe 1 or 2% or 3% of the food inside these stores is produced by food manufacturers that are either outside of these conglomerates or that they've been secretly taken over by these conglomerates. And I'm talking about like organic food, natural foods, frankly natural foods. But it's approximately 7 corporations, give or take, which control the entire food supply of the United States. So you look at everything from the orange juice, you look at the breads, you look at the meats, you look at the chickens, you look at the fruits, you look at the vegetables, the so-called healthy foods like oatmeal or whatever, the healthy foods like so-called peanut butter or whatever. And then if you examine the food supply with even a minimal amount of intelligence, which requires independent reading, you discovered that, years ago when I knew nothing about food, I just ate anything, but as I became educated regarding food, and I still have a long way to go, it becomes obvious that our food supply is, I believe, intentionally targeted to produce disease. I know that's a very, very upsetting thought for some people to accept, but it's part of a bigger paradigm, and the paradigm is too consistent to dismiss it. So, for example, you take white bread. Why are Americans eating white bread? The kids programmed through TV commercials and peer pressure to eat white bread. If you give them brown bread or organic bread, they'll scream and yell because they want white bread like their friends. White bread has 0 nutrition in it. When you eat white bread, you might as well be eating cardboard. Literally. So there's no nutritional value, but that's what the kids want to eat because that's what they're programmed through the television commercials on kids shows to want. And then there are a few essential vitamins that were always in organic breads or breads made decades and decades ago. So you see that certain essential things are stripped deliberately out of white bread. Certain vitamins, certain B vitamins are missing. And so what we have among youth is an epidemic of a lack of certain vitamins which produce produces a whole range of diseases. Now, the reason these diseases are running rampant because white bread has been stripped of these essential vitamins. 2 of them, I believe, are B vitamins. Then you have salt. Okay, salt has been a staple to make food taste better since the time of Christ and since beforehand. That's why he uses the parable that of the church when it's lost. It's like salt that's lost its savor, its taste. So it's good for nothing but to be trampled upon the ground. Well, salt, perhaps the most important mineral in salt is iodine. Iodine is like the master key to a whole cellular system and the thyroid gland that enables our body to reject and detoxify us from certain poisonous things like heavy metal and radiation. Iodine's the primary mineral or nutrient that causes the body to get rid of radiation. And iodine is the trigger for the thyroid gland, and it's the thyroid gland that throws off powerful man-made toxins. Now, everything I'm saying is predicated on the fact that I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not giving you medical advice, so don't act on my advice unless you discuss it with a medical doctor first. Okay, that's my disclaimer. Because some people have certain thyroid conditions. And so you certainly don't want to aggravate a thyroid condition because you're playing around with iodine. And some people have too much iodine. Most people have too little iodine. But whenever there's a nuclear accident and people are affected with radiation poisoning, they distribute iodine tablets. Why? Because iodine works in conjunction with the thyroid gland, and it causes the body to purge itself of heavy metals and radiation. Without iodine, there is mass deaths when there's a nuclear accident. So it's very strange that in a day where we're being inundated with radiation, I mean, you just go to the airport, you're blasted with radiation, that our kids again, and everybody is programmed to eat bread and eat salt where all the iodine has been artificially removed. So once again, the primary nutritional ingredient, for example, in salt, the primary health-bearing ingredient is stripped away. And so you can go down a whole list of foods, and my question is this, it should be an obvious question. Why is it that the primary benefit, the primary health benefit of a long list of very not important, but a long list of foods that are like staples in the American diet, why is it that in so many of them, the key targeted specific ingredients which give it a valid nutritional value has been stripped out of it? It's like somebody is trying to kill us. That's not paranoia, man. That's like your brain. So, many people are dying of cancers and other diseases because their body and their minds are filled with toxic, poisonous chemicals, heavy metals, radiation, and stuff like that. Now, again, you need to consult with a medical doctor. But you see, if you were getting at least the minimal amount, and this FDA approved list of how much of what vitamin you need and what are the essential vitamins, that is the biggest joke in the world. I think they've changed that list somewhat in the last 40 or 50 years. But if you were to determine, like a lot of stupid people did determine in the 50s and 60s, because they didn't think for themselves, they thought like programmed robots, they would buy a bottle of vitamin pills, and they would read what the FDA said was the minimum daily allowance for vitamin C and, vitamin B's and so on and so forth. And minimum daily allowance, which they told you not to exceed, for the most part, was so low, it was so far below what your body actually needs to survive and to be healthy. You have to wonder if the FDA was a criminal organization or in bed with the food industry. I mean, really. Vitamin C, again, I'm not playing doctor, everybody's situation is different. Vitamin C is a very, very important antioxidant that has a full range of functions. The minimum amount of vitamin C was minuscule. I think they've raised it a little bit. The B vitamins were minuscule. And so if you attempted to have a healthy lifestyle, taking your multi-one-a-day vitamin like they used to sell, you'd probably die at an early age because it was a dishonest measurement of the minimum daily requirement for vitamins. So once again, you have to ask the question, is somebody trying to kill us? All right, and you go on the list. Said all fat is bad for you. I don't know which agency announced it at some time. This was like 20 or 30 years ago, probably 30 years ago. All fats are bad for you. You got to get rid of them immediately or you're going to clog your arteries and have a heart attack and die. Well, that was not true. And whatever scientific committee or whatever, this is what happens when bureaucrats take things over. First of all, it reflected an incompetence and a lack of understanding of the fact, the nutritional fact, that there are essential fats that we cannot live without and are essential to good health. It ignored that. It simply made the declarative statement, all fats are bad for us. So people stopped eating fat of any kind. And then they were dying of all these diseases and ailments. What they didn't do was distinguish between what we could call the good fats and the bad fats. The bad fats clog your heart. So, for example, and this should be a no-brainer, see how the Rockefeller family had built their fortune inserting themselves into nutrition and just about every other area of life. So, when I was a kid, margarine came out. And because of the propaganda and mind control capacity of the advertising industry, kids by the millions and adults no longer preferred butter. They would scream and yell for margarine. Okay? But think about how insane that is. They wanted margarine. They wouldn't eat butter. Now, the idea was that if you ate margarine, you would lose weight, which I think is true. But here's the problem. Margarine is made of petroleum, or oil that you use in a car. And they dye it with a yellow dye. So margarine will last, I think, forever in the refrigerator or out of the refrigerator. And because it's essentially motor oil, dyed yellow. It may taste because they have some artificials in it or whatever. It smooths on in a spreadable way. But let's remember something about the fact that when we eat motor oil that goes into the engines of cars, which is kind of what margarine is, our body cannot decompose and process through an industrial man-made product because the body does not perceive it as a food or a nutrient. The body perceives motor oil as a synthetic engine oil. And so when you eat margarine or potato chips or French fries or ice cream or a million other foods which are secretly mixed with petroleum-based auto oil compounds. What happens is that it clogs your arteries because your body cannot test it because it's not organic. It's industrial. It's industrious, for crying out loud. So people began to get heart attacks, die, etc., and it continues to this day because people are not paying attention to the fact that margarine and a lot of salad oils, a lot of the salad oils with the big names that they promote with advertising dollars, are nothing more than petroleum or motor oil. And ice cream, just look at ice cream. And if you don't get your ice cream from the supermarket in home on time and it's a hot day, what you will notice is that your gallon or half gallon of ice cream will separate into like a milky sludge-like substance. This is exactly what happens, I know, because I've left the ice cream in the car a whole bunch of times. You open it up and your ice cream is ruined because it separates when it becomes warm. And half of it becomes this milky sludge-like substance that tastes nothing like cream and nothing like milk. So it must be made of large artificial products. And then the other half of the ice cream separates into an oil. I'm not saying it's the exact same as petroleum oil, but it separates into a substance that looks like motor oil and tastes like a kind of sweetened, artificially sweetened motor oil. So what does it tell you about your ice cream? It's not made out of very much cream or milk product. I mean, I don't know what the percentage is. There's some percentage. It's made basically with all these artificial sweeteners and flavors and man-made products and things called excitotoxins. Excitotoxins is a chemical they can put in food, and what it does is, when you eat it, it releases a chemical which is called an excitotoxin. It's like a drug that turns on your taste buds artificially, and that's why when you eat ice cream or potato chips or cereal or candy or any product that has excitotoxins in it, your taste buds come alive and you have this chemical that goes into your brain. It's a neurological chemical that causes you to crave artificially and delight artificially in whatever artificial food you're eating, like potato chips or ice cream or chocolate or a million other products. So what's causing you you say to yourself, why did I eat the whole bag of potato chips? Why did I eat this whole bag of, Fritos or Cheetos or whatever it is? Why did I eat this entire gallon of ice cream? The reason you ate the entire thing and made yourself sick to your stomach is that it's almost like a narcotic. It's not a narcotic, but it's a chemical that turns on your taste buds and it neurologically hits the reward centers of your brain. Again, I'm not saying it's a narcotic or dope, okay? So don't misconstrue what I'm saying. But it has the effect of stimulating your taste buds so you think it's the most delicious thing that you ever ate, and it could be pure motor oil with some chemicals, but your brain thinks it's the most delicious thing you ever ate. And then you can't stop eating it because it's addictive. Why is that? Because it's not like cocaine or a narcotic. It delivers a powerful reward signal of satisfaction, which produces a very, very microscopic euphoria in the brain. So you actually are getting turned on, for lack of better words, and a high and rewarded the more you eat of this stuff. But it's all counterfeit. It's all chemically induced. I don't mean to be vulgar, and I apologize for what I'm going to say because it could be misconstrued as vulgar, but I don't have another word to use besides the one I'm going to use. But I suspect, I'm weighing in my mind, I think it's going to be too vulgar, so I'm not going to say it. What I will say is, you could put these excitotoxins on particular human waste products, and you would probably find, no, you can fill in the blanks. The excitotoxins make anything taste good. And it's not tasting good because it's made out of cream or milk or, nutritional things. And so then you add to that just about every food product, whether it's wheat, soy, dairy, nuts, corn, tomatoes, strawberries. I mean, you go on and on and on. Breads. We all get sucker punched. You walk in and you see multigrain bread. So you see, that must be healthy because it's multigrain bread. That must be healthy because it's whole wheat bread. No, it's not healthy. It's poison because it's made out of genetically modified organisms, GMOs. And GMOs, according to this biologist, trigger an entire spectrum of diseases. When they're absorbed in the body, they go to the molecular level and they cause disease. Okay? So you think, because the advertising industry is ruthless, they use mind control, brainwashing, indoctrination, and propaganda, and they use all these very subtle substitute words that brainwash you into thinking that you're eating a food product that's really healthy, and it brainwashes you into thinking actually eating a food product that is organic and without genetic modification. Because they use little words that give them the legal loophole to lie without technically legally lying. I'll give you an example. The word all natural, 100% all natural granola, or 100% all natural whatever, and that's put on 1,000 products. That means the word 100% all natural means basically nothing. What it is it's all natural grain, oatmeal, milk, whatever it is. It's all natural, but it's simultaneously made of genetically modified organisms which trigger diseases, and a genetically modified organism technically is not natural. Its DNA has been re-engineered by, but they get away with saying all natural. And when the people of California were furious and demanded that the government force all the food companies to label on every soup can and every product all the harmful chemicals, and to label specifically whether or not, the beans or whatever were made from genetically modified organisms, GMO, even though the people overwhelmingly voted to have a warning label disclosing whether or not the food was made out of GMOs, the powerful GMO lobbying company, in conjunction with parts of government that are corrupt, overruled the will of the people. So think about what this means. All these liars, and that's what they are, they're liars, who say they're trying to do the best for you. As a mother, as a father, as a single mother. If they're trying to do the best for you, they would allow you to read the labels on the food you're buying to find out what garbage is in them or whether they're made from genetically modified organisms. So then you could choose not to buy that food product and poison your kid or give your kid potentially early childhood cancer. But they want you to know. And they don't want you to know because they're corrupt. They're evil. And that's the way it is. You see this? We live in an adversarial system. We live in an illusion The illusion is that these multinational corporations owned by the globalist elite lie constantly. They lie through the media organizations they control. They lie regarding their technology. They lie regarding their food production. And then they spend hundreds of billions of dollars brainwashing the American public with photographs and images and actors convincing you that they're your friend and that they care about you. And it's all an illusion. They don't care anything about you. And it's totally irrational, because with all the hundreds of millions of dollars they're spending on these phony ads trying to convince you how much they care about you and love you, they could take that hundreds of millions of dollar budget and actually produce healthy food. But their greed is insatiable. So those are two attacks against your health and against your children's health. And you ask yourself the question, and see, this is why I have absolutely no patience for Christians who refuse to read, to do independent research, to do their homework. I have absolutely no patience for Christian leaders who say nothing about anything. I have no patience for the Christian culture which enshrines ignorance and stupidity as if it was a gift of the Holy Spirit. You know why? You say, oh, Paul, that sounds cruel. Okay, let's examine your unspoken mental accusation that what I said sounds cruel. Let's examine it in the light of day and in the light of God. By Christian leaders and a Christian culture not speaking up, not educating you about the most important things in your life, things like, obviously, salvation's first, but it's important that you know that certain foods are not what you think they are. It can cause cancer and diabetes and heart attacks. People are dying premature deaths. They're getting out. They didn't have Alzheimer's and dementia 30 years ago. Did you know that? When I was a kid, there were no adults walking around with Alzheimer's and dementia. What happened? What happened? When I was a kid, this was in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. I don't remember what the trend was in the 80s, but let's say in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, I cannot remember a single solitary person that I ever heard of or ever met in my family or friends of family that had dementia and Alzheimer's. It was a non-existent brain problem. It didn't exist. So what happened to cause this epidemic in Alzheimer's and dementia? Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out. Obviously, contaminants, toxins, pollutants, chemicals, food additives in our environment, in our air, in water, and in our food supply, and in medication and everything else. Obviously, there were certain chemical compounds in all of those areas which began to activate and create brand new diseases never seen before called Alzheimer's and dementia. That's right. And if you think for a minute that the scientists and the biologists and the medical establishment don't know exactly what those chemicals, what those substances are that are causing Alzheimer's and dementia, then you're a flat-out sucker. They know exactly what changes were made, either through chemtrails or water or genetically modified organisms or chemicals being used on people or whatever. They know exactly what chemicals are causing the epidemic of dementia and Alzheimer's. Now, do you think it's Christian to not speak up on it? Most Christians do. I don't think it's Christian. I don't think it's loving your neighbor as yourself. I don't think it's honoring your father and mother, one of the 10 commandments, to allow them to die from an unnecessary brain disease where they stare at you with a vacant stare and they don't even know who you are. They don't know who they are. They forgot how to drive. They forgot how to go to the bathroom. And that's happening by the millions and millions of people. I don't think that's loving. Do you? So I don't think it's loving of a pastor to never talk about it. Say, what does it have to do with the gospel? Well, for starters, if God is love and we're to love our neighbor as ourselves, then why wouldn't we have some kind of, perhaps not in the main service, some kind of information, teaching and distributed about what you can do to prevent Alzheimer's, dementia, and some of these other diseases? I think that's love. But you see, there's a hidden agenda behind this. And, a vast network of interlocking information, by the way, that is literally waging war against humanity by design. And that's why I wrote my book, and that's why you feel this passion and anger, a righteous anger in me about what I'm talking about. And this is just part of what the book, The Greatest Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Mankind in the History of the World, is about. It's just part of it. I go far deeper than this. I go into exposing the men, the organizations that have created this top-down global conspiracy, because that's exactly what it is. And quite frankly, I'll be honest with you, as I hopefully have been before. I think it is criminal before the Lord Jesus Christ. I think it's totally a violation of loving your neighbor as yourself and honoring your father and mother and loving your father and mother, which the 10 Commandments teach us to do. That would include our grandmothers and great-great-grandmothers and grandfathers. I think criminal for the church to be silent while euthanasia, the mass killing of the elderly, is promoted in every hospital across America. I think it is criminal and immoral that babies are allowed to be aborted in the womb before they're born, and then even more criminal that a fully grown baby, fully birthed out of the womb, can be killed. That used to be called infanticide. Didn't hear too many Christian pastors speaking up on that, did you? And then allowing GMO foods, which bring diseases, allowing foods and other pollutants and contaminants to bring brand new diseases like dementia and Alzheimer's. Now, there's a hidden agenda behind all this, by the way. I talk about it in my book, The Greatest Battle. There's a hidden agenda behind it. And this is the hardest part for Christians to face. And the reason they can't face it is because they're unwilling to face reality. If you're unwilling to face reality, you are unwilling to face the truth. If you're unwilling to face the truth, then in biblical terms, you are more willing to accept and believe a lie than you are to accept the truth. Not only the truth that Jesus is Lord, but all the truths of the Bible. You see, the deep-rooted issue underneath all of this battle is good versus evil, God versus Satan. That's the deep-rooted issue. And I get into this very deeply in the book, The Greatest Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Mankind in the History of the World. You have to understand that there is an organizational structure that is hierarchical and consists of the most powerful people in the world, and they are moving us like cattle into a world socialist government. A world socialist government is just a Trojan to bring about global communist dictatorship that will enslave mankind. Bible prophecy speaks of it. But of course, if you go to a church where they outlaw Bible prophecy, you wouldn't know what Bible prophecy speaks of. The Bible speaks of a one world government, one world economic system, one world religion, and the Antichrist, the world charismatic leader or dictator, and the false prophet who's head of the coming one world religion and one world economic system that will head up this mystery Babylon. And we're coming soon, sooner than you think, to the place where in order to buy or sell, you will have to receive a microchip implant, 666, and in order to participate in this global economic system, you're going to have to renounce Jesus Christ as Lord and proclaim that the Antichrist is God. That's where all of this is leading. Now, you have to understand that these men and women who are the wealthiest people in the world, not all of them, it'd have to be a case-by-case basis, and I don't know the hearts of every person on a case-to-case basis. But a significant percentage of them secretly are worshippers of Lucifer. They belong to occult secret societies like the Illuminati. Therefore, they're serving the Luciferian plan for a new world order. That's the facts of life, by the way. And so, they operate under a number of primary satanic theological beliefs or tenets or doctrines. One is they are absolutely obsessed with the idea that one of man's greatest problems, if not the greatest problem, is excessive population growth. The elite, the globalist elite, are obsessed with excessive population growth. And that's why, as I explain in my book in detail, which you can pre-order at Paul McGuire Dias and get a discount and an autographed copy. That's why the elite, the globalist elite, are obsessed with reducing the numerical population of planet Earth as fast as they can. So what they wrote on the Georgia tombstones, which was like a New Age 10 Commandments, they wrote that their goal is to reduce the Earth's population from 7 billion to 500 million as fast as they can. And in order to do it as fast as they can, their intellectuals, their leaders, have written openly about what their goal is. So you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to figure it out. I discuss in my book the greatest battle for the hearts and minds of mankind in the history of the world. I'll give you the quotes from some of their most powerful intellectual leaders who openly wrote in their books and in their articles every detail of their master game plan. They didn't hide anything. And they said they were going to reduce, beginning in the 50s, they openly wrote that they were going to reduce the population of mankind from 6,500,000,000 down to 500 million as fast as they could. And then their leaders, people like Bertrand Russell, Aldous Huxley, H.G. Wells, and many others, said the only way we can reduce the population this fast is through nuclear wars, droughts, mass starvation, World War III, endless wars, man-made biological plagues, nuclear wars, man-made chemical weapons, weapons of mass destruction. And now we have weapons which I write about in great detail in my book that still the average person knows almost nothing about, and that is the Tesla scalar wave technology weapons that are microwave energy beam directed weapons. Now, I'll close with this kind of a reality check. For those of you that are cynical and believe the propaganda advertising of the telecommunications companies which tell you, and they're lying, look, there's nothing dangerous at all about 5G technology. Let me leave you with this little factoid. 5G technology, in comparison to the previous 4G, 3G, 2G, 1G technology, 5G technology is 100 times more powerful than the technology we're using now, which is basically 4G technology. It's 100 times more powerful. That means 5G technology operates on a much higher and much more powerful frequency range, an electromagnetic frequency range, than the technology that we now have. So when they put all these 5G transmitter towers all over your neighborhood, you better think twice, because they're 100 times more powerful than the previous technology, and they operate at a frequency, the same frequency. Now, this is important for you to grasp the technology of this. 5G technology operates at in the same frequency range as what the military calls their non-lethal energy-directed weapons. Now, in case you don't know what they are, or if you've never seen a video of them in operation on YouTube, which I think I'll put a link on paulmcguire.us for you to see it, you will see militarized police vehicles, military vehicles, and for the purpose of crowd control, they have this box that rotates, and it looks like a giant big screen TV, but it's a little thicker and it rotates. And what they do is they aim this box, which is really a directed energy beam transmitter, at a crowd. And in order to disperse a crowd, or to cause one specific individual to run out of the way, they turn the switch on their directed energy beam weapon. They turn it into the non-lethal area, and they fire a pulsed energy beam, energy beam at an individual or in a crowd. Now, what happens? The people that are hit by this directed energy beam weapon, they literally feel like somebody put their body on fire and they're burning to death. Or an individual feels like they're burning to death. The pain is so excruciating that they don't even have to think. They run like madmen or madwomen until they escape being caught in the flow of that directed energy beam. They just instinctually run as fast as they can out of the way, and then the sense of being burned up stops. But it is so agonizingly painful, they have no choice. Crowds are always dispersed. I've seen people in rowboats hit with the directed energy beam weapon. They dive underwater into the ocean. A crowd will always disperse. It's not like firing water hoses or anything else. It is a very powerful weapon. But understand something. Once you're operating a directed energy beam wave, that level, which is the exact same level that 5G operates on, all you have to do is turn up the dial a little more intense, and the non-lethal directed energy beam wave weapon suddenly can become a lethal, deadly directed energy beam weapon. And so when they fire that weapon that's just turned up a little bit, they can kill people with a directed energy beam instantly, and the skull is separated from the spinal cord and people die instantly by an invisible directed energy beam, like something out of a science fiction weapon. But here's the problem. All of the 5G technology, because it's 100 times more powerful than current technology, and because they're placing these antennas all over your neighborhoods, the new 5G technology operates way up there in the same range of microwave electromagnetic frequencies. The 5G operates in the same wavelength of EMF wave frequencies as the non-lethal direct energy beam weapons and as the lethal, deadly directed energy beam weapons. It's just how much you turn up the power. Now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist, so just track with me. Your Wi-Fi routers, your cell phone, everything you use is coming from some transmitter, these cell phone towers, okay? when you get 5G, you're going to be getting 100 times more powerful signal. It's going to be in the range of the non-lethal frequencies. But you're not going to feel it like burning it up. But there's a whole range of symptoms and medical problems and very serious medical, psychological, and biological problems that every place 5G has been tested. 250 doctors petitioned the United Nations recently and demanded that they did more research on 5G because 250 physicians from around the world said it's deadly. So there's so the 5G technology is filled with all this deadly stuff, but they're rushing to sell it, so they're not even paying attention to its negative effects. But just like you can tune up your router, just tune up the signal of your cell phone, just like any individual cell phone tower, any individual smart meter, anything that's electromagnetic frequency driven has the capacity to turn up the power a little bit. I can walk into another room in this building and I can turn up the thermostat another 10 or 20 degrees. Okay? There's an immediate difference. It's hotter or colder. Well, any person can turn up the power on the 5G. And guess what has to happen at certain EMF frequency ranges? Either you will move into the area of a directed energy beam non-lethal weapon, or if you continue to turn up the power, you'll move into the area of a lethal, deadly force directed energy beam weapon. Now, let's talk about the other thing just briefly. There are thousands of scientific studies from all over the world of the number of diseases, psychological dysfunctions, biological dysfunctions, dangers, serious mortality risks, autism, a huge spectrum of diseases, insomnia, disturbances, and killing birds, killing insects, and much, much more that have already started to happen in the select cities and nations where they did the test rollouts for 5G. So, bottom line, you're under assault. You're under attack. You don't sit there paralyzed like a victim, hiding under your blankets, sucking your thumb. Knowledge is power. Ignorance is slavery. Read. If you don't want to read my book, great. Find a book that's credible and read it. But for crying out loud, read something. Don't sit there in the stupor watching a sitcom, listening to newscasters who will never even address the subject of 5G because they're paid not to. Knowledge is power. Jesus Christ said, you know the truth, and the truth will set you free. God wants you to live long and healthy. Many of you are suffering from autoimmune diseases of all kinds, and you have no idea what's causing the autoimmune diseases because your doctors are clueless. Again, I'm not going to play doctor, but there's a huge percentage of autoimmune diseases that are caused by superbacteria that masquerade as viruses. And that means certain kinds of arthritis, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, Crohn's disease, a whole list, Lyme disease. And you know what the origination point of that is? I know. Because when I do my research, I pray. The Lord leads me. The Holy Spirit literally speaks to me, not in an audible voice, but tells me what door I need to knock on. He might give me the name of a chemical or a frequency or whatever, and I'll pursue the research. The Lord supernaturally enhances and guides my research. I was struggling with a problem regarding the basis of autoimmune diseases and other sicknesses. I mysteriously, out of the blue, I'm speaking at a Bible prophecy conference, and a guy comes up to me with a knapsack, and he has a thick book along with different nutrients. And this book is the secret account written by the scientists who were actually there, in which this book alleges that a spectrum of about 32 or more, what they call autoimmune diseases, are, in fact, the real cause for them is not what the medical industry is telling you. That this entire spectrum of autoimmune diseases, which can include certain kinds of arthritis and stuff, is actually caused by Operation Paperclip. When they brought the Nazi scientists into the United States, Nazi scientists working in conjunction with USS created in a laboratory a man-made biological plague that could spread through the population. Now, there's different accounts about how it spread to the population, but there's a general agreement among scientists in the know that the real root of all these autoimmune diseases is a man-made biological plague. In other words, a weapon of mass destruction. And allegedly, during, I believe, the first Operation Desert Storm, Saddam Hussein released this biological plague on our soldiers. I don't know if they were ever told. And the soldiers ended up, they're not normally that contagious, but the soldiers ended up transmitting a whole spectrum of autoimmune diseases whose root was a man-made bacteriological plague. These soldiers were exposed to it during Operation Desert Storm, spread it to certain people in the population, and it spread into the insect population, and supposedly is the bacteria, the same bacteria that causes Lyme disease. Now think about that. So you go to the doctor, you don't get help, nobody ever really cures it because nobody wants to open the dark secret door of what created it. And supposedly the cure, well, I'm not going to discuss the cure, not because I'm trying to cheat you, but I'm going to pull back at this moment, not because I'm trying to cheat you, not because I'm trying to sell a book, simply because I don't want anybody to take Paul McGuire's advice and run with it as if it's medical advice and do something ill-advised, because you do have to talk to the right kind of doctor, the doctor who actually knows what the real basis for these diseases are. You can't just talk to any doctor. But the treatment requires a level of involvement with professional doctors who know how to treat these diseases. And I'm not a medical doctor, and I don't want to say anything over the Paul McGuire Report that could harm or kill somebody who indiscriminately begins to use certain things. So that's it for today. Truth is power. It's not always easy to swallow the truth, but I'd rather swallow the truth than swallow a bunch of you-know-what. I'm Paul McGuire. Jesus is Lord. Jesus is coming back soon. And Jesus has given us the power and the wisdom and the Holy Spirit to be overcomers in this lifetime. Visit paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us.